Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com.
Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for Part 2 in your podcast feed.
Thank you for joining us today to learn more about planning for an office move. Today's webinar is part of our continuing series on IT management. My name is Johan Hammerstrom. I'm the President and CEO of Community IT and the moderator for this webinar series. In case you're not familiar with Community IT, our skilled and certified team of IT professionals serves the greater Washington nonprofit community, helping organizations of all sizes and capacities to advance their missions through the effective use of technology. We're deeply invested in the nonprofit community. We've worked with over 900 nonprofits since 1993, and we take a strategic and collaborative approach that fits the unique needs and culture of nonprofit organizations. And now it's my pleasure to turn the webinar over to two of our certified team of IT professionals and today's presenters, Rick Alloway and William Maxwell. Good afternoon, and please introduce yourselves.
Hi, this is Rick Alloway.
I'm William Maxwell.
And between the two of us, we've done about 50 moves with Community IT over the past 10 years. So we've got a lot of experience in this field and are happy to share some tips and answer any questions.
Let's get into it.
All right. So we're going to start out by doing this in a timeline format, but obviously everybody's office move is different in terms of when you actually get to stuff, when you can do things, things come up, leases fall through, you got to work around. So this is a general timeline, but you can do any of these things, the better.
Yeah, in general, we like the 6 months more to get started, just so we have room in case any of those things happen.
So first off, the ultimate goal here, well, one of our goals is to have your new IT room in your new office be neat and clean. You don't want to bring all the old junk with you.
It's important to determine what we can do ahead of time to help make the new space easier and make the space cleaner as we move into it.
Yep. So one of the things we recommend is to have your IT vendor know about your move well in advance. Again, we're saying 6 months out, and think about any of the projects that you might be able to do to clean up old servers, virtualize servers onto new hardware, move services to the cloud. Generally, just get any of the junk out of or get any of the old stuff out, do any projects you can.
And this is a good time to have an audit done just to see where you are and if any of these things can happen in a reasonable time frame before you get started with the office move.
So same idea, you want to minimize your IT footprint in the new office. You want to make sure you do any of these projects with enough leeway so that they can be finished and that you're comfortable with your new systems before the move, so that the move doesn't get in the way of any other projects.
Yeah, and a lot of times though, copier leases are easily switched over during the move, mostly because that's an external vendor and you don't really have a whole lot of work. It's swapping in one for another.
Yep, and the last point here that some upgrades should be done, that applies to hardware like wiring and just unmanaged switches. Anything that's just simple hardware that you're taking in and taking out, because you have to rewire the whole patch panel anyway for your new space, so you might as well get new wiring.
Agreed.
All right, so if you're going to build out a new office space, well, I should say there's two things you could be doing. One is renting an office that already exists, that already has a server room and already has offices and wiring. The other is taking over new space and completely building it out on your own. So a lot of what you need to do is the same, but you think about it differently. So if you're building out your own space, you really want to plan where the network drops are going to go. And so you need to know how many staff you're going to have, Are you going to have 2 people per office? Are you going to have VoIP phones that all require their own networking?
And I'm going to interrupt just for a second. A lot of these questions that we're going through, you can go over with your IT vendor. They may be able to help you out, or your resident expert. So that could be your IT manager or coordinator, CTO, or your accidental techie, the person that just knows the most about the network.
Yep. And things to look at in your current server room. Do you have high voltage outlets? Because you'll need to make sure you have those in the new server room that you're looking at.
You want to, in general, we like to keep the servers off of the ground. Sometimes there are water hazards, mostly around sprinkler systems, even when you're 8 floors up.
Yep. Also a good time to think about your AV equipment. And if you have old Wi-Fi routers, it might be another good time. That's another thing that's easy enough to swap out when you're moving into a new space.
And you definitely want to remember that your new space is not going to be the same as your old space in many times. So you want to make sure what you have now will work in the new space, or just build out new Wi-Fi to build out the new Wi-Fi for the coverage you want to have.
All right, so now we're moving to about 3 months out. And the big thing to think about here is ISPs.
And other vendors, but ISPs, are you happy with them? Are you getting this a good speed for the cost? Like in DC area, the Verizon and Comcast are the big ones, but they're not always the only game in town. So it could help you a lot, and you can do a lot better with cost per speed per month with a new contract.
Right. A lot of people just have an old contract with their ISP that hasn't changed in years, and they don't even know what deals are available. And also, a lot of buildings, at least in downtown DC, where we are, have other ISPs in the building that aren't that you may not have heard of as a residential user. So you're gonna want to ask your landlord at the new office what ISPs are already in the building, and then call them and see what deals are available.
And it's also a good idea to think about getting a backup internet connection if you don't already have one. It's always good to have more than one with different vendors in case one goes down and the other one's still up, so you can still maintain the internet connection, as it's becoming more important to offices just around the world.
Yep, and ideally have them on different platforms. So have one be fiber and one be cable, or something like that, so that if infrastructure in the whole city goes down for some reason, you've got a whole different backup.
Yeah, that's mostly due That's mostly due because in DC, Verizon owns a lot of the internet wires that are buried existing. So if you've got Verizon and Comcast, that's good for balancing that out. But in your own area who's ISPs. Verizon's the phone company and Comcast is the cable here in DC. But in Virginia and Maryland, there could be other vendors that do the same task.
Yep. So this slide is just something to think about when you're coordinating with your vendors. A lot of times, again, around here, Verizon owns the lines that come into the building, and then you might have a separate ISP that takes over the line and runs it up to your floor, and then you'll have your wiring contractor actually wire your office. But sometimes you just get a disconnect and nobody actually wires it from the networking closet near the elevators into your actual suite. And the building manager doesn't want to do it. The ISP doesn't want to do it. Everybody thinks it's somebody else's problem. It's just one of those gotchas you kind of got to keep an eye out for when you're planning these things.
Not anything to really worry about. I know a lot of times the moves I've done lately has not been an issue. More ISPs want to be full service, but it's something to be aware of, just in case it applies to you.
Yep. So to that end, there's always things that are going to go wrong, no matter how well you plan it all.
And 3 months out is a good time to start thinking about your contingency plans.
Yep. So the worst thing that can happen is the internet doesn't come through. But there's about 1 million other things that can happen. I think we mentioned later in here that if you have cloud services for emails, your website, all that, it really goes a long way to minimizing the worst possible things that can go wrong in an office move.
But yeah, more or less, a lot of this is just, we can't hit home enough. Like, make sure the ISP is square and on schedule. Because that's the one thing we just can't replace or patch around. If you don't have internet, you don't have internet, and
and your new office doesn't do anything.
yeah.
So another important thing is staff. This is a good time to get the big players in your office involved. So not just the office manager and the executive director. You want all the directors, all the bigwigs in your company to be involved in this move. So make sure there's no big events coming up at the same time as the move. You want to have them meet with IT management and vendors, and you really just want to make sure everybody's on the same page and involved. Because the worst thing that can happen is people don't pay attention to the communication about it and then get caught unawares.
Yeah, like it may seem like a good idea to do the move while everyone's off at a conference or in a big meeting, but with the big meeting comes big preparation, and ultimately you'll probably just end up doing all the work yourself, and it may not be done right or fully.
Yep, and they won't be happy about it.
Not at all.
All right, so now we're getting a little closer to the actual move. It's time to really start planning your new office. So if you're taking over an existing office, you really want to check and make sure the wall jacks are labeled. That's just really important for troubleshooting as you build out your office. If they're not, definitely recommend having a wiring contractor come in and tone out all the jacks and relabel them. Another thing is take a look at the server room you're taking over. A lot of times there's old equipment still on the plywood in the server room, like old PBXs and I don't know, just all kind of old stuff you run into.
Yeah, sometimes you want to take that old stuff out, but I've also had times where the old wiring proved to be useful with a new move. So you just want to know what's there, and hopefully it's labeled correctly.
Yep.
If not, this will be a good time to have your cabling wiring vendor come out and take a look.
Yeah, and you can talk to the building manager and make sure that it's stuff that you can rip out and throw away and not part of the building's infrastructure or something.
Usually that's not the case, but
yeah,
good to know. And also, I can't say enough about the ISP. Sometimes if you have to build, sometimes ISPs will come to your building if they're not already there. It's important to factor that in, and a lot of times it's prohibitively expensive to have someone come in, ISP come in and bring a new internet connection. So again, make sure to check with your new building management to see what's in the building if you haven't found out already.
Yeah, and then on the last one here, when you're planning your new office or your new server space, you do want to make sure it's secure or at least able to be locked. Yeah, sometimes in very small offices, people just have servers sitting out on a table somewhere. You really want to get a lockable cage where you can keep everything all contained and secure. And preferably just have it all behind a door that can be locked.
Yeah, and I guess it's also important to mention too with the wall jacks, when you're counting, keep in mind that with voice over IP phones and printers, you need to account for those devices as well. And sometimes non-voice over IP phones. You usually can cable the same cable for analog phones as well as digital and voice over IP phones. Our best practice or our ideal situation is to have them each get their own jack. But in a pinch, you can do daisy chain.
Yep. And you can always run phone line over Ethernet jacks.
Yeah.
So if you're getting to rewire your office, do everything Cat6 just so that you're covered for all eventualities. This is also just in general, your current server room probably has a lot of junk in it. So you want to do this well ahead of the move, is just start cleaning out. A lot of it can be recycled, a lot of it can just be thrown away. There are plenty, you'll have to look up a good place to recycle in your area, but I know DC has a lot of options.
Yeah.
Also, to prevent junk in your new space, make sure you get shelves or separate closet, because server rooms tend to get used as storage space if you don't protect your space. Also, a good reason to have a lock on the door.
And when planning your new wire closet, we recommend mounting the switches right up against the patch panels, so we can have small 6 or 1 foot cables leader for tech support to take a look and see what goes where, as similar to this picture we have here.
Yeah, so we have the patch panel is just 24 and 24. The top are for phones. They just go to the phone switch. The bottom are for internet and go to the internet switch. You can see there's no tangles, no big loops of wire. It's really nice to be able to do this when you're moving space and actually having a chance to rip everything out of your closet and put it in a new space and nice and clean.
Yeah, and the different colors help a lot too.
Yeah. So also at this point, it's time to start thinking about what you're going to need for the move. If you're going to rewire your patch panel, like we said, you're going to want a lot of the short 6-inch or 1-foot cables, and if possible, get the bootless cables. That means they don't have that extra little piece of plastic around them. When you're trying to wire 24, 48, or way more cables all right next to each other, it's really annoying to have those.
And it's not necessary to order it from Amazon, but in the office supply store, Staples, or some of the other ones that will have all of this equipment, including the network patch cables.
Yep. So you're definitely going to want to have some extra Ethernet cables on board, just because you never know. You're going to want to have extra surge protectors. Velcro strips are great for wrapping up cables and tying stuff down and making it neat.
Twist ties and tie wraps will work too, but the tie wraps are difficult to undo later if you need to get a cable out or move things around. And if you cut them, or at least they could cut even as you try to open them, they can cut the wires. So Velcro is usually the way to go and has the bonus of sticking to carpeting to help you hide wires around corners of offices.
Yep. And then bubble wrap, that you really just have to figure out what your movers want to do about servers. Some of them you can just turn them off, unplug them and set them in the hallway, and the servers will take them off, the movers will take them off for you. Others want you to have everything boxed up and wrapped and packed. So you just got to check with your movers on that one. I think we'll get into that later on a later slide here too. All right, so back to staff. Some staff are going to be super excited about the move and excited to plan their new office, and others are just going to be annoyed, and it doesn't matter what you do, this is going to be the case.
Yeah, it's important to set low expectations. Usually plan for we like a Friday move. So staff aren't working in the office on Friday, and the network won't be back until the end of the weekend.
Yeah, so you want to tell everybody network's going down Thursday night, and don't expect it to be back up till Monday morning. That way, even if you plan to do the whole move on a Friday, you still have all weekend to deal with any mess ups.
Any issues that may come up, your fault or not.
Yep. Yeah, because there's a lot of vendors to coordinate, and yeah, if you need the extra time, you've got it.
Yeah, some of the downtime and service outages will be less of an issue, as he said before, if you have services in the cloud, mostly email, web hosting, files. If all that stuff's in the cloud, it's less of a problem, and you really just need to get the internet up.
Yep, and it means staff can work from home while you're doing the move.
But we wouldn't recommend going to the cloud just for this move.
Right, you're just complicating things at that point.
Yeah, if you think, as we stated before, if you're thinking about it, go ahead and think about, like, before the 6-month period, you want to have a plan in place for migration, so it's not conflicting with your plans for the move, because you also want to give time to that so that it won't interfere with moving.
Yep. So other good ideas for staff is definitely to have a staff meeting, allow people to voice their concerns. Some of this is going to be petty stuff, like whether they get a window or whether it's who's got to share an office or who's next to the bathroom. But you still, as much as you can get all that information in beforehand, the better you can plan for it and make people happy at the new space.
Yeah, it's also a good time to show them the pre-move checklist that everyone has to do, and point out who the move coordinator is going to be if it's not you.
Yep, sometimes that's just another staff person, but that's somebody who knows everything that needs to be done, i.e. just helping staff unplug or be prepared to unplug their computers, get all the peripherals, get their boxes ready, make sure they know the number of their office so they can get everything to the new
labels,
place.
Get the labels done.
Yep.
And there's also a good point where you'll be able to figure out who are your problem or your high-touch staff members are, so you know either you will have to walk them through it or just do the work for them.
Yep. Yeah, knowing who you're going to have to handhold is definitely helpful if you know it beforehand.
And a lot of times you already know who that is in your office.
Yep.
So it'd be good here at 1 month out to plan for that as well.
Okay, so now we're down to the move the week of. So this is a good time that you should really be figuring out who's moving what. As I mentioned before, sometimes the moving company will do the servers. Sometimes you need to do a lot more work. A lot of moving companies have a last in, first out policy for servers, where they'll pack up the entire office and then put the servers in last. And then you and the IT people can just ride with them to the new office, and they'll take the servers right out first, and you can get those back up so that the IT people can get the internet back up and the servers back online as soon as possible.
Ideally, I would recommend you ask for that from the movers too. If they don't mention it to you, recommend it to them that you want your servers up and running. And that also is helpful so IT staff isn't waiting around for the movers to unpack the entire truck to get to the servers.
Right, particularly if they charge per hour.
Particularly.
Yep. So actually packing up staff computers is another good point. I definitely prefer it when staff pack up their own computers because I think it helps them to make sure they get all their stuff in the right place. A lot of move companies we work with will either provide crates or big, like 3-gallon Ziploc bags, and you can fit a whole computer keyboard in there. They put their mice, speakers.
It's a good way to keep everything together. And again, it's a good time to have that checklist available again for staff to remind them, like, you have all this packed up, good to go.
Yep, so they'll have all their peripherals and their computer and monitor packed up with labels on them that say office number 3 or Mike's office. And the movers will pick all that up, bring it to office number 3 or Mike's office, and then you, the IT company, just come in and set it all back up. Yep. And then lastly, staff should have solid time frame established. And this is just, again, being as communicative with staff as possible. It's just the best way to avoid people flipping out on you.
Although that does not exclude them from flipping out on you anyway.
It doesn't, but you do what you can.
And so at this point, we're going through our checklist to make sure we have everything we need. Is the ISP confirmed for the new space and the new time? Ideally, we like it to happen overlap. So we have the internet up in the new space before we move in. So the IT vendor or tech expert can go in and check and make sure it's working fine. So you have plenty of time to resolve any internet issues.
Yep. Yeah, that's huge, just having the overlap. Because then your major issues are covered. But it's hard to do if you're keeping the same ISP, because they'll usually want to take your circuit and just move it over at the time of the move. So you can't always help that.
Yeah, but a lot of times the ISP will work with you and and they can do what you would like them to do. You just need to ask.
Yep. So other than that, it's just checklist stuff. Are your copiers moving? Are you getting new ones? Do you have to use a service elevator? Do you need keys to access the new building?
Or key cards and fobs.
Yep. And do you need to get those for all the people who are helping with the move? Or copiers for the movers, copiers for the IT people?
Mm-hmm. And I think something I would add is often when is the network going to be unavailable? In our experience, whatever time you set, someone will ask for 15 more minutes twice. So it's good to tell everyone the servers are going down at 5, but expect it to really be 6.
Yep. Yeah, people will always ask for an extension. All right, so this is some more logistics with the actual move. Obviously, desks need to get moved in before computers get moved in. Otherwise, you'll have everywhere to put them. If you're getting new modular furniture, it all needs to be built before the computers can go in. But then a lot of times, desks and stuff get moved in and cover up the outlets and the jacks, and then you can't get behind them to actually plug stuff in, or then you or the IT people have to start pulling desks back out after they just got moved all in. So ways around it are either to ask the movers to leave them at least 6 inches from the wall so you can get back in there, or put power strips and internet cords in place before the furniture gets moved in.
And I think some other things to keep an eye on is the night before the move, is when the servers go down. You want to make sure that everybody's off when you take them down. And again, make sure that you set up the servers or pack them away like the movers are expecting. If you trust them to move your stuff, but you should know by now if they're moving your servers or not. And it'd be good to have some tools, extra tools laying around just in case.
Oh yeah, make sure to bring your screwdrivers, drills, all that.
Yeah, just have them available. An IT company will usually bring their own stuff, but sometimes there's just a lot of hands and a lot of people going around. An extra screwdriver or an extra set of pliers could come in very handy.
All right, day of. So yeah, no such thing as a perfect move. There's always going to be stuff going wrong.
Yeah, once you have all the prep work done, you should get to be able to rebuild your new network in a new clean space with new wiring and switches. But of course, this all will be overshadowed with things going wrong. And although, the perfect move may be a unicorn, but that's not to say that your move will not be smooth.
Right. But here's some things that could go wrong.
And again, we beat on the ISP gong.
Yep.
We say this a lot because ISP is probably the most often thing that runs into problems.
Yeah, and it's the one thing we can't work around. If anything else is wrong, we can usually find a way around it for the time being, but this is the one thing we can't fix without getting the ISP involved. So the other thing, again, we've done a lot of moves, and I've never had a server get damaged in transit, but that's not to say it couldn't happen. So you really want to make sure you've got your backups are all good the week before, and also that your hardware warranties are all up to date on your servers.
As much as possible.
Right.
You want to also keep an eye out if you're hosting your email or website on site and you have to take that server offline. You want to make sure you handle this carefully and have contingency plans and prepare staff and your constituents, clients, or the people you serve that they know that you're going to be moving and that nothing horrible is happening, that you're just going to be off the internet for a while.
Yeah, if you still host your own email, have your own Exchange server, emails will be unavailable during the time that the server is physically in a truck. So ideally, you have another service that can spool it in the meantime, so that when people come back online, it all just sort of flood back in.
I find that in the beginning, around the 3 or 1 month mark, it's good to put on email signatures that you're moving, so everyone knows that you may be unavailable on this day for a period of time, not to call the police.
Yep. So other things that can go wrong, if you're changing your subnet for any reason, which does happen.
Yeah, just make sure to keep in mind about your other networking devices, and that's mostly copiers, printers, postage machines, security cameras, some things that you don't always have to deal with, but do need to connect to the internet or just your network to work. It's important to remember them, especially if you have to change IP addresses or change when you're changing the network.
Yep, anything with static IPs, you'll need to update.
Indeed.
All right. Well, we went through that pretty quickly, but so yeah, here's the main issues: is ISP. That's the one thing. If it doesn't work, your office doesn't work. So do your best to plan for that. Secondly, take care of your staff. They're the ones who you want to be happy at the end of the day. So do everything you can to prepare them and plan for them and make them happy. And yes, definitely buy pizza for everybody who helps out. And then vendors, your IT company, the movers, everybody else, get them all involved as early as possible. Nobody wants to have it sprung on them at the last minute. Yeah, and don't forget about the phone vendors too. Oh, right. If you're keeping or switching your phone service, they want to be involved just as early as everybody else. So as soon as possible for those vendors, phone vendors, wiring vendors, copiers, the copier maintenance people. Those two, they don't like to be forgotten either. Nope.
Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for part 2 in your podcast feed.
Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.